morning, everyone, and thank you once again for being here with our weekly SonRise Project call. As always, I'm so happy and honored that we are joined together in this safe space filled with love and compassion and our desire to heal ourselves. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. On this Sunday morning, I'm so delighted to welcome back with us Dr. Norm J. Jones. He is here as an organizational development scholar, practitioner, and he focuses on equity-minded executive leadership and team development. With over 25 years of experience in higher education and organizational management, he has held senior leadership roles at large-scale organizations and some of the nation's premier colleges and universities. His past positions include special assistant to the superintendent of Harrisburg City Schools, associate vice president and dean of institutional diversity at Dickinson College, associate chief diversity officer at Harvard University, and chief equity and inclusion officer at Amherst College, where he's calling in this morning from Western Massachusetts. As a published author, Dr. Jones has contributed several articles and book chapters and is a sought after speaker and lecturer. He frequently speaks on topics such as diversity as ecology, inclusive onboarding, building trust among mid-managers, and tomorrow's DEI. A graduate of Harvard's Institute for Educational Management and the Tavistock Institute on Human Relations, he was also an Arthur Vining Davis Fellow at the Aspen Ideas Festival. He holds a BA in English from Morehouse College and both a Master of Public Administration and a PhD in Workforce Education and Development from Pennsylvania State University. He also holds offices in the Delta Chi chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated and Beta Sigma Boule. In his personal time, Dr. Jones enjoys life with his wife, Paula, their blended family of three, and their two very spoiled French bulldogs, Bella and Jaden. So happy to have you back, Dr. Jones, this morning. Thank you for being here for our conversation on Black.
Okay, well, Norm, go ahead and get started with, yeah, she's going to come back in. So go, as Kelly mentioned, go ahead and introduce yourself and then get started with your first question.
Okay, sounds good. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, that was a pretty long intro, so I won't belabor any more bio. Um, it's wonderful to be with you all this morning, and I'm actually pretty excited to talk about mental wellness and what it means to me. For better or for worse, you all tend to get me at times when I'm kind of in a self-project mode, and so I'm always trying to work on myself as a kind of project, and wellness is very much so a focus for me right now. And what it has come to mean to me ultimately is moving past or trying to move beyond a lot of labels to discover who Norm Jones is. And I'm saying it that way because if my preoccupation is wrapped up in um, being Black, being a man, being a Black man, being a husband, being all these identities and roles, then I really don't get to the heart of who God made me to be fully. And so mental wellness for me has a lot to do with actually pivoting away from a lot of labels and recognizing that if I wasn't on this earth, if Norm Jones wasn't here, there are lots of things that would not get done. There are lots of people who would not be engaged with because I have a very particular assignment as the creature God has created me to be. And the word be for me is the key there. There's an author, Eckhart Tolle, who talks about the journey to becoming a human being. And what he says is we have the human part down pretty well, but the being part is what can be very challenging for me. So I'm in a mode of pause, slowing down, trying to listen to inner voices more than outer voices, and just being. So it may sound, abstract, but the being part of human being is really where I'm parked right now. So that's what wellness has meant to me, is really trying to interrogate what being looks like and means for me. And then the clearer I am about that, the better off I am when it comes to engaging with other people.
What does being look like for you? What does that feel like for you? But I know I've heard people talk about we're not human doers, we're human beers. We're human beings. And so I love this
Yeah,
notion of really living in the being. What does that look like for you now versus maybe what you might have been in the past doing?
yeah.
Can you explain more?
So for me, it looks like a process of trust, I would say. And the trust is, of course, in God and the God in me. And so I was not really raised necessarily to listen inside. I was raised in the church. I was certainly raised to learn about God and to believe in God. But what that looked like growing up and for a lot of my adulthood had a lot to do with listening to what other people had to say about various roles. Um, so I think maybe the last time I was on the call, I gave the example of one of the examples was being at Morehouse College was all about being empowered as a Black man. And I remember one of the first messages that was sent around being a student was work hard, play hard. So if you get your work done, then you can party, but you don't party and then get your work done. And what I have learned in my latter years or lately is when you over index on either one of those, your work is going to suffer and your play is going to suffer. So it's those kinds of messages that the world sends men in particular that I am having to calibrate. So being for me is trusting that inner voice that says, actually, it's not time to work right now. It's time to sit down. Or the inner voice that says, you've been sitting for an hour. That report's due tomorrow. Get up. And if I'm distracted by all these other messages about what I should be doing or how I should be behaving, I'll miss what I'm supposed to be doing in the now moment. So it's really about trusting the God in me more than all these other narratives that are out there, because these narratives are helpful, but they're also prototypes, right? There's nobody's out there saying like this is what Norm Jones should be doing, but they might say this is what Black men should be doing, or this is what men in their 50s should be doing. So you take the meat, you spit out the bones, and you figure out what makes sense for you in the moment. That's very much so where I'm parked right now.
So
That's
Norm,
awesome. I love your Morehouse example. Oh, thank you,
oh,
Dr. Vicky. I'm having really unstable connection.
it's
So thank you.
yeah, it's okay, Norm. I wanted to just kind of go back to um around mental wellness for you. Can you share, or do you have specific practices that you use to maintain your mental wellness and well-being? What does that look like for you? And then you
Yeah,
have a son, right? So
I
how do
got
you
two.
practice that? How do you practice that with your boys? Because we're parents here. And so it really love to, because you are in such a high visibility, sometimes high pressured environment. Can you share some of your tools and practices?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with some of my practices that are for the most part daily practices at this point. So I do think it's important to say that practice is the key word. I am trying to build new and different habits. And one of the best ways to do that obviously is to practice. So um when I wake up, when my eyes pop open, I try to make it a point to pray a specific prayer about um, being open to how God wants to use me in that particular day, because I'm such a doer that if I don't pray that prayer, my mind will automatically default to the ticker tape, to the to-do list. And I am finding that when I pray the intentional prayer, God, what do you want me to do today? How do you want me to show up today? Often the list is not the list that I came up with for myself about what needs to be done. So just being intentional about prayer. Um, I also every day try to connect with the earth by being outside as early as possible. That's a big one for me because my mood is very much so connected to weather. So in the winter or when it's very rainy, I tend to not be very tuned in to myself, and I can kind of get in my head about the different things I have to do and all of that. So just reminding myself that I am a small piece of the earth, but that also makes me a very big piece of God's assignment on the earth. So if I can literally connect with the ground, connect with the wind, see the sun, allow the earth to get in me, then I am much more grounded, and I have a much more purposeful day. With my boys, one of whom is 27, the other of whom is 14. Um, my 27-year-old is living his life in a way that's like watching myself in a movie at his age, except we have an extra kid in the mix. So he's a father of two. And I am watching him do a lot. And I think my work as a father with Jason is mostly about affirmation, because my default as a man probably, but more so a dad, is to try to help him do. And that lesson around being on the wheel and doing is not something that anyone can teach us out of. We have to have our own experience with the plus and minus of doing. And so Jason has to know when he's hit the wall on doing. Jason has to know when he's so preoccupied with getting things done that he's not attending to his own self-care, etc. So with Jason, it's all about you got this today, son. I always used to tell him as a little toddler, you are a warrior. I would get in his face and say, you are a warrior. And so when I do that now, it's funny and we both laugh, but I also mean that. You are a warrior. And it has nothing to do with how well or not well you've done a particular thing on a particular day. So just pouring into him. And then with my 14-year-old, it's really, right now at least, about taking the journey with him and not allowing whatever energy he's giving off to jump on me. Because at that age, it's very easy to try to legislate even their emotions. It's like there's a part of me that's like, you just woke up. How could you have that face on? Like, give the day a chance. But I don't know what experience he's having. So that's an opportunity for me to pray for him. That's an opportunity for me to offer kindness and say, can I make you some breakfast? And I notice with my 14-year-old that the more I let him be in his emotional space and I'm in my emotional space and he knows that I'm there for him and it's not dictated by what mood he's in, the closer we come to one another because we're connecting on an energetic level and not a roles level. Like, what am I supposed to do as a father? Or what are you supposed to do as a son? It's like, just if you love people, just roll with them energetically. And things tend to work out. So not being preoccupied with mood is a big one for me and my 14-year-old right now. And I don't have to even tell you what that looks like with my 11-year-old daughter. If there's a
Yeah.
manual, please send it.
I think it's so powerful for us as parents, especially here in this community, to hear a man, father, son perspective, because as is, I'll say, the pattern, the frequency is usually the mothers, right? who are in place. So it's inspiring, I'm sure, for the moms on here and encouraging for the dads who join us. And we appreciate them just to hear you be so transparent, because a lot of us are in high pressure positions. The community, the country is in a high pressured environment right now, as we all know. So you talk about, you know, our mind, our bodies, our spirits, which I love. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a guest, Delbert Thurman, from the Social Wellness Project, just talking about a man's need for space to process his emotions. So can you share a little bit, Norm, about the separation for a man, since we're talking about Black men and mental wellness, from the thinking versus feeling self, because men are so conditioned to do, right? Frequently, you don't operate from a place of mindset first. It's let me do. And so a lot of us have sons, son-in-laws, brothers, husbands here. So can you
Yep.
talk about the socialization of men around thinking, feeling, and what that process is like? Like,
Yeah.
how do you practice that?
Yeah. So much in that question. I think the first thing I want to say is that we know sort of philosophically, I guess, that the heart and mind are connected. And I'm also coming to realize that my mind um, and my thinking, so the way my brain works, um, is a product of all the messages that I've taken in over the years. And I think it's the thinking that is most connected to the doing. So if I try to get closer to what's in my heart, I'm finding that that is starting to transform the way I think. And then that shows up in what I do. And that's very big for me. I would say, well, certainly fatherhood, but I'll use marriage as an example. And the specific example that's coming to my mind right now um, is about thinking about how I'll use the word pious I was early in my marriage, that I was very preoccupied with and fixated on what the Bible has to say about marriage, what the church teaches about marriage, what it means to be head of household, and all the ways that I lived that out and performed that is the word I'm going to use, were not entirely helpful in my wife's eyes because I was showing up in a kind of dictatorial, patriarchal way, archical way that was not at all resonating with her. And so, because we were able to have a conversations about this over time, that started to pivot me away from this role play into a space that was more like, okay, what does it look like for you to cleave to your wife and for her to cleave to you? What does that look like in your heart? Once I started to discover that and affirm that, much of my behavior as a husband and the head of household, in the way that the church was defining it, really started to change. And for me, it was about talking about my process with my wife rather than not talking about those things and trying to do it right and then present that to her. And so I think sharing our journeys with people we trust is just as valuable as what we produce. And I'm learning how to do that with my wife, but also my kids. I mean, I will tell my kids when I haven't had the best day, and I don't impose a bunch of negative stories on them, but they need to be able to humanize me rather than me
Mm.
showing up as this shiny leader
Hero
who
all the time.
has figured things out. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So sharing my process is with people that I trust and trusting myself enough to know that sharing my process is not going to take me out or cause people to think of me differently is a big piece of where I am right now, Vicky.
I love that. I have a follow-up question that's in the chat from one of our community members. What can and you are in such a unique position to answer this because you're a parent and you are on college campuses, right? So what can you offer to us as guidance to share with our sons, especially, and daughters, but especially our young Black men who are heading off to college? And how can they protect as best as possible their mental health, not wanting to listen to what mom and dad have to say because they know it, right? I got it, I'm good, right? We get that answer. How can we support our children, especially our Black boys headed to college, around their mental health? And I'm going to add in this climate, right?
Yeah,
Because it's also scary. So I just want to add that caveat. Can you share some insight from your experience and expertise with that question, please?
yeah, yeah. I love that question. It may sound a little trite, but the first thing that comes to my mind is find community. And there's a way in which college campuses, especially if they're liberal arts kinds of institutions, there's a lot of messaging around stepping outside your comfort zone and finding people who think differently than you. And this is your opportunity to really interrogate um, uh, argumentation and debate and finding the counterpoint and all those different things. And all those things are important skill sets. But we really underestimate, especially in this current time and climate, what it means to find your community, to find your people. And there's nothing wrong with being in a homogenous environment. Like, our Black boys don't need to make apologies for wanting to hang out with other Black dudes or wanting to be, this is my bias, wanting to be in a fraternity or wanting to be on, whatever team, because that's not just about the activities of those cohorts. It's about the solidarity in those cohorts. It's about the fact that people aren't talking smack to one another or tearing each other down. Those are spaces that affirm. So so supporting our Black boys as they find their communities and trying not to put labels on those communities based on what we see, because we don't know what's happening on the inside of them as those guys pour into one another. So that's a big one. Number two, doing all we can to try to encourage um, finding resources and support for our mental wellness, making sure that we destigmatize um, counseling support, peer counseling support, advising that comes from teachers and professors, and then trying to create a space where they are actually sharing what's coming out of those spaces. People share within their own comfort level, but knowing that there is a community surrounding your son is important. And if he knows that you're affirming him in that way, he's more likely to share what's coming out of those relationships. And then the last thing that I would mention, which I think we often overlook this or underestimate it, is service. When we remind ourselves that a lot of our power comes from giving back, it starts to shift our self-concept. So I'm always encouraging Black men and boys to find opportunities to volunteer, find opportunities to help, find opportunities to just show kindness on a daily basis. And I'm from the South, so opening doors and all that kind of stuff is just how I'm hardwired. But you would be surprised how much it shifts our essence when we make ourselves available to other people. And you can never start that too early. So college is a perfect time to really lean into giving back, because it makes you a better person and it makes other people better too.
Yeah, that's a great great advice. And there's also the loving parental pop-up just to do a check-in, which
Absolutely.
I was known for over the 4 years my daughter was in
Absolutely.
college.
Yes.
I just made the time. showed up at events and programs unexpectedly, and sometimes when there was nothing going on.
Right.
I just popped up. I want to go back to this. I know Eckhart Tolle is one of your favorite authors, and do want to stay in the practicality of our conversation today as well. But can you just, I'm saying, help us, support us, give us some insight and guidance on about, you talk about the human being, becoming a human being, right? And we get the human part by default. It's the being that is hard for men. Is that connected to the feeling for men? And how can we motivate our unmotivated children into being? Because what we know is the doing happens organically, right? Once they tap
Yeah.
into who they be. But
Yeah.
help us help them, because sometimes we just want to fix it, but we've constantly been reminded on this call by our guests, sometimes we get in the way when we want to fix it and short circuit the lesson. So
Yeah.
can we talk
Yeah.
about that a bit?
So the fixing, well, let's first show ourselves some grace. The impulse to fix as a parent, irrespective of gender, is just gonna happen. So, maybe there's a way in which we need to not beat ourselves up so much about just the thought of wanting to help. Now how that shows up and whether or not we go too far in the way we intervene, that's an important topic. But we are going to want to help people we love. And we're probably missing opportunities to show ourselves grace in that a little bit. But I think the most practical thing we can do, and I acknowledge that it's easier said than done, is take the journey with our sons, make sure that they know we are there, quite literally, and acknowledge that their doing and not our doing is going to involve mistakes and bumps and mishaps and falls. And it's not so much that those things occur, it's more so how we engage with them when those things occur. Um, I think about my oldest, who's expecting his third right now, and that's not something that was in my plan for him, nor was it in his plan for him. But here we are. And from a mental health standpoint, I know that he is kind of going through it because he's trying to figure out, well, what do I do? What do I do now? Um, and my job is to help him understand that life will throw all kinds of things at him, some of which is about other folks and circumstances and the external environment, and a lot of which is about his decisions. But he's no less Jason, my son, who's an amazing human being, just because there are some circumstances that are not the greatest right now, right, in terms of his plan for his life. So for me, it's about being there for your loved one, for your son in the journey, and being able to talk about it. And I think if we share some of our wellness practices with our kids, that starts to seep in, right? So I've watched Jason, for example, do something as simple as sit down and breathe before he talks. I've watched Jason um, say to his partner, I can't talk about this right now, but if you give me a few minutes, we can come back to this conversation. So I think it's really about communication and giving permission for our sons to share what's going on for them. The other thing I want to say really quick is that being part is about who you were created to be. And so there's only one space reserved for that person. And so if we can push our sons to kind of move past some of these labels and roles um, that we message about all the time in the culture, to recognize that there is literally only one you, and what you're invested in is trying to help them understand who that person is. Then it helps them really try to get at the core. That process of discovery, that journey of discovery about who you were created to be, that is the sweet spot. That is the journey that we are all on in this life, figuring out who God created us to be. And out of that, always, always, always comes the doing.
Love that answer. There's a question in the chat. Can you be there for them and yet remove yourself from their circumstances? And I'm going
Yes.
to add, for me personally, the consequences, right, of
Yeah.
their becoming who they are. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Barely, but yeah.
I'm
Um,
sorry, but not sorry.
no, no,
Oh,
no.
I
Yeah.
love the deep breath that you just took.
It's, I guess the most practical thing I can say, and I know I'm on Jason a lot today, but I mean, he's 27, so, he's adulting, as it were, in ways that my other kids aren't quite yet. Whether I feel like there were individuals who intervened in my life in appropriate ways, inappropriate ways, or whatever, the fact of the matter is, I was the only one living my life. No one was there with me when I made XYZ decision. And so, really, in retrospect, the best thing my mom, in my case, is my mom, and grandmother to a lesser extent, could do is take that journey with me. So, I, you can be with your son and not be in the circumstance, because at the end of the day, they're the only ones living their life. And in my case, the work is really, really about looking out for those moments and spaces where I know Jason is dealing with shame, and trying to remind him that there's hope outside of the circumstance, and that he is no less God's child and no less a powerful Black man and no less any of those things that he knows intellectually, just because he's in a moment that is challenging. And I also know that if I were to insert myself in a particular way that I know in my heart of hearts is not really my job to do, that is going to recoil on both of us in a way that I will regret. So I'd rather deal with the pain of watching him fall off the bike than insisting that the training wheels stay on, because that's about my ego. Jason has to live his own life. And my job as his father is to remind myself that I have put into him what God asked me to put into him, and that there are mistakes that I have made that will show up in his life. So I have opportunities to show myself grace and show him grace, but he needs to know that I'm taking the journey with him from my parental place, not from a place of enablement or living his life. He's got to live his own life. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's
No, no,
that.
no. It does. I'm pausing because that is so deeply resonant, I know, for us here. And literally, I'll speak for me, living something like this right now. And it can be difficult. But I love that you said we have to be mindful not to be there from a place of arrogance. And this is what I think you need to do. This is your life. You are becoming who you are, which is a perfect segue. And you know, community, family, if you have more questions, please put them in the chat or come off mute and just ask your question while I'm asking on this question. If you could ask, can you just talk about the alchemy of it all, right? We are becoming who we are, and our young adult and teen children are doing the same. Can you just share the value of trusting that process of alchemy
Yeah.
and what that looks like, and really leaning into who we be, right? You talked about in conversations with you and I, just the individualism and how that can be negative. Yet, when we talk about alchemy, it's important. Who am I? Why am I here?
Yeah.
And we're on that journey here as parents collectively every week. And the goal and intention, I know, of Kelli and Dee is for us to leave these calls every week with tools we can practice with ourselves first, and then in support of our children. That's the
Yeah.
crux of this community.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things come to mind. One is the power of narrative. I mean, Black families in particular, I think just naturally share stories, funny stories, stories of triumph. I mean, it's part of our tradition, our heritage, our legacy. Um, but I wonder if we have really taken the time to align the stories we tell our kids with the things we believe they need to learn and know. Um, I know with Jason, for example, he I think at a point was very fixated on my professional credentials, my the jobs that I've held, and the same with his mom. And as someone who dropped out of college fairly early, he was at Tuskegee and finished his first year and a part of the next semester. There was a lot of shame there because it was all about like, well, if I'm not in college, then I can't do this and I can't do this and I can't do this. And it became clear to me that even though I'm a college graduate, sharing stories with Jason about what it was like to be a fairly unmotivated student at first in college actually resonated with him more because he can identify with the struggle of school. And so sharing those kinds of stories um, can connect us to the lived experience of our kids. The second thing that I would lift up is, I guess I'd call it living out loud, maybe. When there's a power differential and an age differential and all of that, it's very easy for our kids to almost assume that we have arrived, that we aren't on a journey. I mean, the only thing that separates us really is age, role, of course, but it's not like we are not still learning. And I think there's probably a level of transparency around what it means to live life actively as a learner. We're not taking enough advantage of that because of the weight of our roles, right? We need to have figured some things out. But it's also true that we are figuring some things out. And I think it's okay to be more transparent about that with our kids. Being in higher education, I'm always talking about humanizing the professorate. And we did this experiment when I was at Amherst College where the professors at the very first day of class, they would just talk more biographically about who they are. And they would even talk about some of the challenges they were having as researchers, as scholars, all of that. And you would be surprised the ways in which students saw them differently because the professor gave permission for that student to have access to their life's journey academically, that they don't have it all figured out, that they do still have questions, and that they're calling students into a space where they can co-create learning, where they can create together. So I think there's an element of that that's important in parenting, that we can give our kids greater access to our daily learning, to our life's journey, and to even talk about it with them, because that lets them know that you're on the same journey they're on, just at a different stage in time.
I agree. That vulnerability and transparency does, I believe, turn the corner in terms of them being able to relate, right? And one of the things I've had to stay mindful of is who I am out in the world. My
Yeah,
child knows it, is aware of it, but what has been most valuable for me is sharing the stories of my private evolution and struggles and challenges and acknowledgments that I didn't always get it right. So I
that's right.
love that
Yeah. And let me
you're
say one other thing real quick,
reiterating that.
Vicky.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. Wait, there's a little lag. Sorry about that. Um, it's just as you were talking, Vicky, I just got this image. Like it is so powerful for our kids to watch us go out there and come back in because it isn't as if it's one or the other, right? We are out here fighting the good fight on public stages, on public platforms, taking all kinds of darts and hits, right, for righteous reasons. And we are also having a very human experience. And when we come back in, we have wants and needs, and those need to be attended to. And we also have responsibilities. And helping our kids know that they are walking into that kind of environment. They're in that environment and they will continue to be in that kind of environment. Helps them build life skills, right? If they had a crappy day at school, there's nothing wrong with saying, and you're going to have more crappy ones. And come here, let me hug you. And let's celebrate the fact that you're not at school anymore, right? So we get to reset. So you can go back out there tomorrow and try different things and maybe get knocked down again. But guess what? It's not going to knock you out, right? That is life. That continuum, that experience, that dynamism is life. And I don't think we can start teaching that too early.
I don't either. It is a continuum, right? And again, one of the most powerful things, one of our community members said, same journey, different time in the journey. And what stops me at times is you used to be that age. You made some really silly decisions then.
Absolutely. Those are those
You know,
stories. I'm telling you.
and I think as a community, returning to sharing stories and storytelling is going to be a healing balm for
Yeah.
us and our families and in our relationships, and just remembering and then
Yeah.
sharing, right? Because it's easy to frame it and freeze it in the moment. Like, what are you doing? That
Yeah.
is just, why would you do that? Right. And then I remember, but what did
Right.
you do when you were that age?
Right.
So that is just
Yeah.
so powerful. Are there any questions? Does anybody want to come off mute? Do you have any questions for Norm? I just want to make sure we have space and time to give opportunity to ask any questions. We are talking about Black men and mental wellness, and it is so, so important because right now there's a lot being said, Norm, about Black men and mental wellness. So here's a question. How do you as a man pull yourself out of the dark? How do you as a man pull yourself out of the dark night of the soul phases, especially those moments when you know and feel the social, political, and cultural systems that are supposed to support us and build us as a country and people aren't working? How do you do that work internally? Yeah, and
Yeah.
how do you educate your children on that?
I'm going to go back to the ego. And this is, I don't even know the word to use other than this is critical for me right now because I am a person who I sometimes call myself a recovering apologist because I'm not really ego driven. I've never had like a huge, inflated sense of self or anything like that. I, over the course of my life, have in various ways made myself unnecessarily small. And what that starts to build over time then is a sense of resentment when people treat you as if you're small. And the important and painful but critical process is to realize that you've never been small. So what you're bringing to the table often is the answer. And so when I am out in the world, um, having to contend with the really problematic messages that the culture sends around men and Black men, those are the times that I have to really tap into the good parts of ego to say, wait a minute, my power has nothing to do with this narrative. And I actually have an opportunity to reject that narrative based on what I know about myself. For me, it's not about saying that out loud necessarily. It's about standing on 2 feet and allowing the amazingness that is me to do its work. So I can be in a room with, you know, crappy white folks who have all these weird notions about Black people and Black men, and just say what's in my heart and what I know to be true because I'm trained and credentialed and saved, and allow that profile to do its work. And it's not necessarily going to show up in what they say or the decisions they make, but because I was there, I believe that God's will be done. And I may or may not see the manifestation of it, but if I have been true to my assignment by showing up in my full power and my full authenticity and not saying things to myself that make me small, that power does its work. So that's why I keep harping on getting to what it means to be whoever you are. Not necessarily a Black man, not necessarily a husband, not necessarily all these different things, but whoever you are, insert name. If you are committed to being that person, the rest will follow. And that's just what I'm finding in the world. And it has liberated me from trying to live into these prototypes, right? Like I'm on a hospital board, for example, right? And I can get really wrapped up in showing up to the board meeting and trying to make sure that the most clinical version of me is there so I have credibility with these other hospital board members. I'm not a physician. I have a PhD, not an MD, right? But you invited me onto this board for a reason. So if I just lean into what I know to be true, ask questions that feel right based on what I'm hearing, then don't worry about what the other board members think of my question. Like it's the question I have. And so I'm going to ask it. So that's an ego thing. That's a confidence thing. And it's rooted in knowing that Norm Jones is here for a purpose.
How did you
Not,
get there, Norm? I got to jump in here because we are getting
yeah,
close to the end. How did you get to that moment? And because the question also came up from one of the parents, how do we teach our children not to shrink, right? We can say that.
yeah,
What is or are some practical steps to help our children not to shrink? Because I felt that. Sometimes I feel like an imposter. I'm sure
yeah,
sometimes some of us feel stepping into rooms where we are the only
yeah,
or the first, can be daunting. But I love
yeah,
what's resonating in my heart is I'm not gonna shrink. I'm
yeah,
gonna be who I am, right?
yeah,
And not apologize for it. So
yep, yep. So one of them, one of them really quickly is teaching our kids where they come from, whether they want to hear it or not. I could care less whether or not you are excited about hearing about your great great grandfather. You're going to hear it, right? And I might even give you a pop quiz on it. So knowing that that is in us at the level of DNA,
mhm.
and constantly reminding our kids of that because it's getting in there, whether they're talking about it or not. You are literally from these people. And that means these things because this is who they were. And that means this is who you are. That's one thing. Another thing is getting our kids to understand their unique skill sets. Or it doesn't even have to be unique, their skill sets and leaning into that. Like if you're a really good synthesizer, you can take somebody's rambling words like me and like put it all into one sentence that says exactly what I said, but in way fewer words, encouraging them to do that often, right? Because they build confidence in their skills. If you're the harmonizer, my daughter is always the one that's like intervening into her friends' conflicts. And when she's finished, it's like everybody's singing Kumbaya again. That's a skill set, right? And teaching her to be proud of that and to practice that, except for when you're tired of doing it. And then you get to take a break and sit down because you also deserve that, right? So that's another one. And then I guess a third one, I like to think in threes, is giving our kids permission to know that they won't always get it right, but that doesn't mean that they have to question who they are or their assignment, right?
Say that
So
again.
they don't
Say
have
that
to
again.
question who they are or their assignment just because they don't always get it right. You build confidence in what you're here to do by going out and doing it and messing up and having the courage to do it again.
Say that one more time. You build confidence.
You build the confidence of knowing what you're put on this earth to do by doing it over and over again and messing up and deciding to do it again. And there are countless stories of very successful people who have that exact journey. So there's nothing unique about failure or challenges, but you do have the opportunity to decide not to have that overtake you or to question what you're actually here to do.
I'm letting that breathe. I'm taking a pregnant pause because that's good for all of us. And I hope that we are writing it down. That's why I asked you to repeat it, because that's good to say as a reminder. Just because it didn't work doesn't change who you are or who you are called to be or why you are here. I love that so much. I love that so much. Are there any other questions as we begin to wrap up? Norm, this has been amazing, as usual, as I knew it would be. As I knew it would be. Are there any other questions? You can type in the chat or hit *6, come off mute, ask your question today. But
I have a comment, Dr. Vicky,
okay, please.
for Norm. Just letting you know, starting tomorrow, I'm going to be selling T-shirts that say trained, credentialed, and saved. And I'll let you pick the size you want.
You said that earlier, Norm. I'm trained, credentialed, and saved. So Dee said she's gonna create some T-shirts
I love
and,
it.
and send you the size.
Exactly.
I will absolutely wear that.
I'm taking full credit for that statement.
That's fair.
Thank you.
Do you feel fulfilled and joyful in your person, who you are as a person? Question is, does he feel fulfilled and joyful in his person versus your role awareness now? Right? Like, are you fulfilled being who you be versus fulfilled by doing what you do? Have they integrated and been alchemized, as that
Love it.
word that
Look at
you
you.
love?
So the short answer is yes. And I think my work right now has more to do with sharing that yes with others because I'm still wrestling with that integration in a way that makes me trust that others can appreciate it or understand it. And then, of course, the difficult work of like, if they don't appreciate it or understand it, it's still my work and it still matters. And not having the acknowledgement that everybody may not get it impact me negatively, right? Because as I said, I can be a person who internalizes a lot of stuff, especially when it comes to roles that I care about. Like I don't want my kids to be disappointed in me or my wife to be disappointed in me, but they do need to know that my journey is of utmost importance to me. And the more I commit to that journey, the better off they're going to be too when it comes to who I am to them. So it's yes, and I'm still trying to figure out how to share this journey with others. That's the journey I'm on. I hope that makes sense.
It does. I'm just pausing just so we can take it in. This is so powerful, the way you're able to frame for us, right, how you got here because of your credentials and your training. You know, we can easily make the assumption that, oh, he has it all together. And the truth is, that's why we're all here, because we're trained, credentialed in our respective spaces, yet we need permission to feel safe to work through the kinks, right? And lay our ego down and say, I don't have it all together. And so thank you for adding value to that formula that has been and is being perfected here at the SonRise Project on this Sunday support call. You will be back because you're trained,
Thank you.
credentialed, and as Dee said, saved, and you'll probably wear your t-shirt at that
Absolutely.
time.
Yes, I will. And
But I
I'm going
just
to give
want to
Dee full
ask
credit.
one more time before we close out, Norm, can you just share any last thoughts before, we close the call today around Black men, Black boys, Black young men and mental wellness? That is not just for this month, it's forever and always. But thank you for affirming for us that we can give our Black men permission to feel and be, not just think and do. That's my takeaway, is create that space for them to do that. Because
Yeah.
doing nothing is being, right? Doing nothing is doing something.
That's right. That's right. I think
So
the bottom line is to say out loud to our Black boys and Black men that permission that we talk about, that our utmost desire is that they give themselves that permission and don't take it back. And if you can stay committed to that permission, everything will flow through that. Again, there's only one you. You are not the label, you are not the role. You are insert name. And if you give yourself permission to fully interrogate who that person is, you are going to live a fulfilled life because you're being who God created you to be.
last pregnant pause.
Hmm.
Last pregnant pause. How do we do that for our Black boys if we're holding hurt and disenfranchisement with their fathers or others? And that'll be the last question.
I guess the best thing I can say is to commit to doing the work of addressing that hurt and giving yourself permission to feel what you feel, irrespective of what anybody else says you should feel. It is an individual journey. And I think often the way hurt shows up for many of us is that it shows up in our relationships, and we end up potentially doing further damage because we feel justified in acting out the hurt in a certain way, whether we intend for it to be hurtful or not. Hurt damages us
Yeah.
and others. And so just protecting the sacredness of counseling, of being in community with others who understand it, and recognizing that the fragility of that causes us to take that journey only with those we trust and those who mean us well, and to not prematurely try to engage with others who hurt us in a way that may exacerbate the situation. So just, it's a sacred journey, and don't feel bad about taking it alone or with just a few others who you trust, because it deserves that kind of care and protection. And when you will know when you are healed enough to have conversations with those who have caused you hurt. Trust your gut on that, pray about that, throw things out there to others who have your best intention in mind. But don't operate in a vacuum. Just really lean into that community of care to know how the hurt is being addressed, and when you're healed enough to address it with others.
Perfect.
That's my advice.
Perfect. 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 No need to apologize. Thank you so much for that answer, for your presence, for your time, for your love, for your sister. I appreciate you as my brother. Thank you all for being here. Norm, how can our community members connect with you before I pray?
Email is probably the best way, and my email is norm at integrateddiversity, that's two D's, .org. And I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and all that good stuff as Norm Jones. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. God, we thank you for this beautiful day that you've given to us. We choose to rejoice and give you glory. Thank you that healing is a sacred journey. Thank you for the downloads today, the impartation. Thank you for Norm, his journey, his experience, and his willingness to share here with us in the SonRise Project community. We thank you for Kelli and Dee. Thank you for every parent, every household, every child that is represented in this space. Bless us to go out and to be better so that we can do better. We give you glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, Norm.
Amen. You
We'll
are
be
so
in touch.
welcome.
We are
Thank you
so
all. Love
grateful.
you.
We are so grateful for you. Have a powerful day, everyone, and we'll be back next Sunday. Invite somebody that you know will be blessed by this community and these conversations. See you next Sunday at 9 a.m. Peace.